Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Fallout 76 video. So, yesterday the PTS opened. Today we're taking a look at video number 2 on the patch notes. And I've split these all up for a number of reasons. Partly because the patch notes are very, very long. Partly because they have natural breaks in them based on the topics covered, and also on the fact that the stuff we're covering in this video is in fact going to arrive much sooner than everything else. So yeah, yesterday we went over the fishing update, which is the new sort of gameplay style activity to engage in content stuff. That will be arriving in June. Looking forward to that one, probably the first week of June. So I'll link that up in the corner if you want to check that out. And in the next video, we'll cover the stuff that is the gameplay combat changes that will be arriving alongside that. What we're going to look at today is going to arrive much sooner in terms of it'll be part of the mid-season patch from the look of things. Obviously, there's no date specifically here, but what Bethesda have said is that it will be coming before the fishing patch. So reading between the lines, Bethesda always do a mid sort of season patch. That's what I call it, rather, just to kind of clarify. But it basically, in between the March, June, September, December major updates, they do smaller bug fixing and server maintenance patches. Usually just the one. It looks like this one is going to be much bigger than usual. So, let's jump in and have a look at what we've actually got changing here. Limb damage and crippling changes. So yeah, this will kind of roll over into June as well. This is part 1 of 2, I guess, on that. But this is really focused on changes to how crippling works and how we deal with that sort of aspect of gameplay. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't think there's any point to this. They're doing it, so I'm covering it because you're going to need to know about it because your perks will be changing with this and probably again in June as well. Although, more details on that next video. But despite all the changes they're making here, for the most part, you're still going to be better off just going straight for weak spot damage, so headshots and the like, and taking enemies down as fast as possible, because trying to cripple them outside of score challenges is mostly just a waste of time. It just takes longer to take your opponent down. You're effectively amplifying the bullet sponginess problem yourself by targeting their limbs. There are exceptions with really big, tough enemies like the world bosses, the region bosses they call them, the Scorched Beast Queen and the like. However, even then, because they're making some other changes, it still doesn't make a great deal of difference. You're better off just applying as much direct damage as possible to a weak spot, some of which will be getting buffed by some of this, by the way, so there is that, especially come June. However, in terms of the limb damage and stuff, this is... yeah, not something that's really worth a great deal, I don't think. It is a consistency thing, so from that regard, like bringing everything into line, it makes a certain amount of sense, but yeah, I wouldn't encourage you to think of this as a great idea to go for limb damage, because it'll top up your damage anyway a little bit, but for the most part, if you focus on that, you're actually going to be weakening yourself. Anyway, let's have a look at what they've got to say. We are making changes to the way that enemy limbs are affected by various effects. The mods, perks, and weapons mentioned below previously had a chance to instantly cripple a target. So yeah, percentage chance to instantly cripple. But now, going forward, after this update anyway, in a few weeks, they will deal a percentage increase to the amount of limb damage dealt. So it affects the amount of hit points per limb that are taken off, rather than having a percentage chance to instantly cripple. We expect these changes will make enemies easier to cripple, whilst making limb damage more consistent and predictable. Yeah, that's still not going to make it worthwhile, outside of, as I say, those specific score challenges. It will result in making crippling enemies like region bosses more difficult, requiring more focused fire. Now that I do agree with as an approach, because these are single target enemies being attacked by large numbers of players at once. So making them more resistant to that is... you have to do that, otherwise they'll be dead so fast they won't be even worth mentioning, basically. So yeah, that's definitely the right call there, I think. These changes will also allow us to remove cripple immunity from many creatures and leverage limb and crippling in a more engaging way moving forward. Well, the first bit I agree with. So, as I just covered, everything in this limb damage and crippling changes section, which is really not as clearly marked out in the patch notes as it could be, speaking of, I'll link them down below by the way, will be released in an update before the fishing patch later this year. So the fishing patch will probably be the first Tuesday in June. That's the usual update day. It occasionally changes depending on needs, must, and so on. But it'll usually be about then. That'll also be when Season 21 starts, by the way. But this set of updates coming sooner, mid-season update. So, perks. What's happening here? Bashers. This one currently just increases the bashing damage a gun does. Now it just increases their limb damage. So it looks like the Bashers perk will just allow you to damage limbs rather than doing anything else. Still not making the gun bashing effect particularly useful. I still think it should just provide massive stagger gun bashing, and then it would actually be a functional effect. If it was like this, it's just kind of pointless. Anyway. Enforcer. So this applies only to shotguns. They will have stagger chance. That's what it does already. I don't know if those numbers have changed. Maybe. But either way. They've shifted from a percentage chance to cripple to percentage increase in limb damage. So Modern Renegade was changed in the last update to affect all small guns rather than just pistols. And you get the hipfire buff, and it will do limb damage instead of chance to cripple. So, yeah, same change. One gun army. Same thing with heavy guns. This is where we're going to get a little different. Tormentor. So this is being moved from luck to perception, which makes a lot of sense. This is the perk that allows you to do armor penetration and crippling chance, or previously crippling chance, with rifles, particularly automatic rifles. And it was all the way over in luck for some reason. It didn't belong there. It was weird. But moving that makes a lot more sense. On the flip side, though, in terms of, well, I suppose if you're a VATS player, luck's useful in a different way to the way I use it. So, but luck has kind of more space in its list, I guess. Fewer valuable cards in my view. So, moving it does kind of pull it into a tree with perception that is almost that is much more in demand. Really, your special points in the perception tree are likely to be used up before you get to this perk anyway, I think. But you will deal 20% more damage per crippled limb to your target, so presumably losing the armor penetration effect, which would constitute a nerf in my view. And 20% buff per crippled limb means up to 80, possibly 100%, depending on whether or not a heads count, which is still a bit ambiguous. Currently they do, but there's stuff further down here that suggests that might change. But I think they do. So potentially up to 100% more limb damage, but only if you go around crippling each limb. And with almost every enemy, you're not going to want to do that because A, they'll be dead before you get to the last one anyway, and B, just shoot them in the head and they'll be dead in the less time than it would take to cripple half their limbs, so it's pointless. But the point cost has been increased from 1 to 2, and the ranks reduced to a single rank rather than there being 3 of them. So in that regard, slightly less special points if you want to equip this. I wouldn't bother, to be honest, though. So, Bone Shatterer. This is one of the new ghoul ones, I believe, if I remember correctly. And it has your melee weapon attacks, instead of having a chance to cripple, they'll do limb damage directly. So there we go. Mutations. So we'll be looking at some more mutation changes in the next video, but this one specifically will be arriving sooner. So, Twisted Muscles. We'll be switching to a 25% melee, unarmed, and bashing damage increase. And a 50% increase to limb damage if you're using the previous weapons, melee, unarmed, or bashing. So yeah, that's basically making those melee builds that bit more effective at delivering damage and limb damage. So definitely a buff to this one, I think, particularly over here with the melee damage thing. So yeah, worth having for those melee builds, which are already crazy powerful, especially if you're a ghoul. If you go strange in numbers and you group up, you can get an even bigger buff of 35% and 62% instead of 25 and 50. So, yeah, quite powerful that one will be. So, we've got some weapon changes here that will be getting 50% buff to their limb damage instead of their previous chance to cripple. Specifically, that only affects 3 weapons: Black Powder Rifle, Bone Hammer, and the Dragon. Again, I don't think this is going to make them more desirable weapons on the whole. The black powder weapons there, the 2 black powder weapons, are so slow anyway that they are going to be still undesirable to use, I think. And I can't really comment on the Bone Hammer. I haven't done much with it. It's a fun idea. But I've never seen anybody else wielding a Bone Hammer either, so... yeah, I don't suppose this change is going to be the one that changes that. There we go. But consistency. So, there we go. Weapon mods. A whole bunch of melee weapons here getting adjusted. A number of the additional damage mods are being changed, some of which will constitute buffs, some of which will constitute nerfs. As you generally swing them in a somewhat horizontal manner, That's probably not such a bad thing because you probably are hitting limbs more often than not anyway. So I think it might have a knock-on effect as a buff overall, just due to the direction of the swing. So that's an interesting thought. But specifically, we've got a whole bunch of the mods that affect the baseball bat. There's a weapon I wish was more effective than it is because it's just fun. I understand why it's not, but still. Bare arm, boxing glove. I suppose many people are using that. Same for the golf club. Lead pipe's basically worthless. Pipe wrench is basically worthless. Sheep squatch, club, and staff. The heavy mods for those will affect limb damage. Will have a 50% increase in limb damage, that is. And sledgehammers, again, a whole bunch of different mods that will do additional damage to limbs. But yeah, again, you'd just go for the super sledge instead of the regular sledgehammer. Not sure why that's not listed. Maybe it's already doing that. I don't know. Or maybe it doesn't have these options. That might be it, actually. And the tenderizer, this one's probably worth mentioning for those few people who use it for the fun factor, because tenderizer definitely has plenty of that. The salty mod will now increase limb damage as well. So, they mentioned before that certain enemies will no longer be immune to crippling. Most of this relates to daily ops, but there's a few others as well. Grimbot, who is the boss at the end of the Test Your Metal event up at the Metal Dome. It's quite good fun. Dr. Blackburn is a quest-related enemy and a one-off encounter, so I won't say anything more about that for spoiler reasons. Sheep Squatch Imposterling is a mouthful. An Imposter Sheep Squatch. Both of those will now be crippleable, but at least as far as the Imposter goes, it tends to go down so darn fast once the shield is removed that, again, won't have time to be crippled, I don't think. Blue Devil, the Augure, which I may or may not be pronouncing wrong. The Jersey Devil and the Lesser Devil. Well, the Jersey Devil, again, is a one-off. All of the Trog types and the Strangler Grafton monster will also be crippleable. And this is where we get into the daily ops. So the following enemy types in daily ops will be crippleable. They're already crippleable when you're not in daily ops, but when you actually are in that particular bit of content. Previously, they weren't. With this update in a few weeks, they will be. This also applies to all of their subtypes for those that have subtypes within daily ops, because some of them have additional secondary enemies attached. So, cultists, fanatics, overgrown, aliens, robots, blood eagles, mole miners, communists, scorched, and super mutants. So basically everything. Okay, so that is where I'm going to hit the pause on this one, because we get to the perk balancing, and I'm mostly sure this is where we go back to the stuff that will be arriving in June. I really wish there was a line here or something, but the best I've got is that the font size jumps up ever so slightly here. So we also start to get doubled up sections in terms of perks and mutations after this, so it seems likely that this is where it goes. In either case, I'll be covering this in a separate video, probably on Monday, because, again, there's a lot of stuff to go through, so let's make it at least somewhat more bite-sized if we can. So, in short, yeah, big overhaul to the way crippling damage is dealt with that will be arriving between now and June, probably in about 5 or 6 weeks-ish. Obviously, as I say, still no confirmation on when that might be. We'll find out probably last minute, as per usual. Then they don't have to subsequently delay something they've already announced, really. But yeah, I really don't think for the most part this is going to make a great deal of difference. You'll get a subtle increase in damage for those shots that don't land on weak spots or don't land centre mass and that hit limbs. But on the whole, it's still more effective to just focus on headshots and the like and taking enemies down as fast as possible. If you're focusing on crippling outside of trying to earn score, you're probably wasting your time. The exception being the melee ones, which will probably see a bigger damage increase, just because you're going to end up hitting limbs more often due to the animations. But then again, they really don't need the buff, because melee builds, especially if you're a ghoul at the moment, my oh my are they powerful. They are crazy. Anyway, hope you guys found that useful and informative. A whole bunch of changes coming much sooner than expected. If you did like the video, please do consider dropping subs and likes, hit that notification bell, and then you'll be updated for the next video and all the others after that. And yeah, social media links in the description, patch notes there if you want to check them out as well, and channel memberships down below the video as well if you want to support the channel that way. I very, very much appreciate. Massively helps out the channel, that, so massive thank you to everyone who has done so. And if you get a chance, join us for live streams. We're playing Fallout 76, we're playing Avowed, which we've been having a really good time with, and we're playing Atomfall, which is so much fun and actually has challenging combat. So yeah, really, really cool. Lots of stuff there if you want to get into, and rumour has it, lots of cool stuff on the horizon as well, so If you got a bit of time to watch some live streams, then there is your opportunity. For now, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.